Oakland, 1951. A 6-year-old boy goes to the park with his big brother and vanishes without a trace. For 73 years, his family never stops searching. Then, 7 decades later, a DNA test yields an impossible result. The missing boy is alive. This is the astonishing true story of a child abducted in broad daylight and found living a lifetime later. How did one family's darkest mystery finally unravel? Stay with us as we journey through this incredible cold case, one that proves that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Before we dive into this extraordinary case, if you're fascinated by mysteries that defy belief and cold cases that finally break open, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button and drop a comment below. You won't want to miss what happens next. This is Cold Case Crime Lab, and this is a story that will leave you speechless. West Oakland, California. February 21, 1951. It's a mild Wednesday afternoon in the post-war boom years of California. In a neighborhood park on Brush Street, children are playing tag and swinging from monkey bars. 2 brothers laugh as they chase each other across the grass. 6-year-old Luis and his 10-year-old brother Roger Albino are recent arrivals to the neighborhood. The Albino family moved here from Puerto Rico just a year earlier, part of a wave of immigrant families seeking new opportunities on the mainland. The boys speak mainly Spanish at home and are still picking up English at school. But on the playground, none of that matters. Here, they're just 2 kids enjoying a carefree day. Luis is a petite boy with dark hair and an infectious smile. He idolizes Roger, who has a protective streak for his younger brother. Their mother, Antonia Albino, is a hardworking woman who cleans houses to help support the family. Their father works long hours at the docks. The family doesn't have much, but they have each other, and that's enough. On this particular February afternoon, Antonia gives the boys permission to walk the few blocks to the park. It's a routine outing, one they've made dozens of times before. Roger, being the older brother, is responsible for watching over Luis. He takes this job seriously. The park is bustling with activity. Other children from the neighborhood are there too, their voices creating a symphony of childhood joy. The weather is perfect, not too hot, not too cold. It's the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive, to be young, to be free. Roger and Luis play for what feels like hours, though it's probably closer to 45 minutes. They climb on the jungle gym, they run relay races with imaginary finish lines, they lie in the grass and watch clouds drift by overhead. For 2 immigrant children still finding their footing in a new country, these moments of pure, uncomplicated happiness are precious. Then, in an instant, everything changes. Roger turns his back for just a moment. Maybe he's tying his shoe. Maybe he's talking to another kid. Maybe he's looking up at a bird flying overhead. The exact detail has been lost to time and trauma. But when Roger looks back to check on his little brother, Luis is gone. At first, Roger doesn't panic. Luis has probably just wandered over to the swings or gone to get a drink from the water fountain. The park isn't that big. Roger calls out his brother's name. Luis. Luis. No response. He walks around the playground equipment, checking all the usual spots. The swings are empty. The slide has other children on it, but none of them are Luis. The water fountain stands alone, water dripping from its spout. Roger's heart begins to beat faster. He calls louder now. Luis. Luis, where are you? Other children stop playing and look at him. Some of the parents on the benches at the park's edge begin to take notice. A 10-year-old boy is shouting frantically, and there's real fear in his voice. Roger runs the perimeter of the park, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, every group of playing children. He checks behind trees, behind the small maintenance shed, behind the benches. Nothing. No sign of his little brother anywhere. Now Roger is running, really running, his breath coming in gasps. Tears are starting to stream down his face. He knows he's supposed to be watching Luis. He knows this is his fault. He knows he's going to be in trouble, but more than that, he knows something is terribly, terribly wrong. He approaches one of the mothers sitting on a bench. "Have you seen my brother? He's 6 years old, this tall, dark hair, wearing a blue shirt." The woman shakes her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I haven't seen him. Did you check by the bathrooms? There are no bathrooms at this park." Roger keeps searching. 15 minutes pass. 20 minutes. Half an hour. Roger makes the agonizing decision to run home and tell his mother. The few blocks have never seemed so long. His legs feel like lead. His chest is tight with fear and guilt. When he bursts through the door of their modest home, Antonia takes one look at her older son's tear-stained face and knows immediately that something has happened. "Where's Luis?" she asks, her voice already rising with panic. Roger can barely get the words out. "He's gone, Mama. I can't find him. I looked everywhere. He's just gone." Antonia doesn't waste time with questions or recriminations. She grabs Roger's hand and they run back to the park together. By now, it's been nearly 45 minutes since Luis disappeared. The sun is starting to lower in the sky, though it won't be dark for several hours yet. When they arrive at the park, Antonia begins her own frantic search, calling Luis's name over and over. Other parents have joined the effort now, organizing a systematic sweep of the area. They check every inch of the park, the surrounding streets, the nearby shops and businesses. Someone suggests checking the nearby creek, and a group of men jog over to search the banks. The thought of what they might find makes Antonia feel sick. After an hour of searching with no results, someone finally suggests calling the police. In 1951, this isn't as automatic a response as it would be today. Many immigrant families are wary of authorities. Language barriers exist. There's a sense that maybe the police won't take a missing immigrant child as seriously as they would other cases. But Antonia is desperate, and she agrees immediately. The police need to be called. Her baby is missing. The Oakland Police Department responds to the call with a patrol car. 2 officers arrive at the park and begin taking statements. They ask Antonia and Roger to describe exactly what happened, what Luis was wearing, any distinguishing marks or features. Luis is 6 years old, they tell the officers. He's small for his age, maybe 40 pounds, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. He was wearing a blue shirt and brown pants. He speaks mostly Spanish, though he knows some English. He's shy around strangers. He would never just wander off on his own. The officers take notes and assure Antonia that they'll do everything they can. They radio for additional units to help with the search. Over the next several hours, more police officers arrive, and the search expands beyond the immediate park area. They knock on doors in the surrounding neighborhood, asking residents if they've seen a young boy matching Luis's description. They check backyards, garages, any place a small child might have wandered or hidden. As night falls, portable lights are brought in, and the search continues. Volunteers from the community join the effort, people who don't even know the Albino family but who understand the nightmare of a missing child. The search goes on through the night, but there's no sign of Luis anywhere. By the next morning, the case has attracted media attention. Local newspapers run stories about the missing Puerto Rican boy from West Oakland. Luis's school photo, a sweet image of him with a gap-toothed smile, appears on the front page. The headline reads, "6-year-old boy vanishes from Oakland Park." The article describes the circumstances of his disappearance and appeals to the public for any information. Tips begin to come in, dozens of them. Someone saw a boy matching Luis's description getting into a car. Someone else saw a child crying at a bus stop across town. Each lead has to be investigated, and each one ultimately leads nowhere. The Oakland Police Department assigns detectives to the case. They interview everyone who was at the park that day, trying to piece together a timeline. Several witnesses remember seeing the 2 albino brothers playing together. A few recall seeing Luis alone at one point, near the edge of the park, close to the street. One witness, an elderly man who was walking his dog, remembers seeing a car slow down near the park around the time Luis would have disappeared. He didn't think much of it at the time, but now, in hindsight, it seems significant. What kind of car was it? The detectives ask. The man isn't sure. Dark-colored, maybe black or dark blue. An older model, he thinks, but he can't be certain. Did you see the driver? No, he didn't get a good look. Did you see a child get into the car? No, he didn't see that either. It's frustratingly vague, but it's something. The detectives develop a working theory. Based on the witness accounts and the circumstances, they believe Luis was abducted. A child doesn't simply vanish from a public park in the middle of the day without someone taking him. There's no body, no evidence of violence at the scene, no indication that Luis wandered off and met with an accident. The most likely scenario is that someone took him, someone who saw an opportunity when Roger's attention was elsewhere. This conclusion is both a relief and a horror for the Albino family. If Luis was taken, it means he might still be alive somewhere. But it also means he's in the hands of a stranger, someone with unknown intentions, someone who took a child from his family. The investigation expands. Police check with known offenders in the area, anyone with a history of crimes against children. They investigate recent strangers to the neighborhood, transients, anyone who might have been passing through Oakland on that February day. They follow up on every tip that comes in, no matter how far-fetched. Someone claims to have seen Luis in San Francisco. Another caller swears they saw him in Sacramento. Each sighting is investigated, and each one proves to be a case of mistaken identity. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. The intensive search efforts gradually wind down, though the case remains open. Antonia refuses to give up hope. She keeps Luis's bedroom exactly as he left it, his toys arranged on the shelf, his little shoes by the door. Every day, she prays that her son will come home. Every night, she cries herself to sleep, wondering where he is, whether he's safe, whether he's scared, whether he remembers her. Roger, now 10 years old, is consumed with guilt. He blames himself for losing his brother. He replays that day at the park over and over in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. If only he hadn't looked away. If only he'd held Luis's hand. If only they'd stayed home that day. The weight of responsibility crushes him, and he carries this burden for the rest of his life. The Albino family is never the same after Luis's disappearance. How could they be? There's an empty chair at the dinner table, a missing voice in the house, a child-sized hole in their hearts. Antonia and her husband eventually have more children, but the loss of Luis haunts them always. Birthdays are particularly painful. Every February 21st, the anniversary of Luis's disappearance, is a day of mourning. Every time Luis's birthday comes around, Antonia wonders how old he would be now, what he would look like, what kind of person he would have become. Years pass. The 1950s become the 60s. The 60s become the 70s. The case of Luis Albino, once front-page news, fades from public memory. New cases come in, new tragedies unfold, and the limited resources of the Oakland Police Department are directed elsewhere. The file on Luis Albino is moved from active cases to cold cases. It sits in a filing cabinet, gathering dust, one of thousands of unsolved disappearances across the country. But Antonia never stops looking. Even as she ages, even as her other children grow up and have families of their own, she never stops hoping that somehow, someway, Luis will come home. In the decades following Luis's disappearance, there are occasional developments in the case, though none lead to his recovery. In the 1970s, there's a brief flurry of activity when a man comes forward claiming to have information about what happened to Luis. He says he knew the person who took the boy, that Luis was taken by a couple who couldn't have children of their own. The detectives are skeptical, but they follow up on the lead. It ultimately goes nowhere. The man's story doesn't check out, and he's unable to provide any concrete evidence to support his claims. It's another dead end in a case full of them. In the 1980s, the Albino family is contacted by a private investigator who specializes in missing children cases. He offers to take a fresh look at Luis's disappearance, to see if there's anything the original investigation might have missed. The family, desperate for answers, agrees to let him review the case file. The investigator spends months going over the evidence, re-interviewing witnesses who are still alive, tracking down new leads. He uncovers some interesting details that weren't in the original police reports, but nothing that brings them any closer to finding Luis. The trail, after more than 30 years, has simply gone too cold. By the 1990s, most of the original investigators on the case have retired or passed away. Antonia is now an elderly woman, and her health is declining. She knows that time is running out, that she may die without ever knowing what happened to her son. The thought is unbearable, but she tries to make peace with it. She tells her other children stories about Luis, keeping his memory alive for grandchildren who never met him. She shows them the one photograph she has of him, that school picture with the gap-toothed smile, now faded and creased from being handled so many times. Roger, now in his 50s, has never married, never had children of his own. Some who know him say it's because he never forgave himself for losing Luis that day at the park. He becomes the keeper of his brother's memory, the one who refuses to let the case be forgotten. He contacts the Oakland Police Department regularly, asking if there are any updates, any new leads, anything at all. The answer is always the same. No, Mr. Albino, there's nothing new. We're sorry. The case remains open, but realistically, after this many decades, the chances of solving it are virtually zero. Then, in the early 2000s, something remarkable happens. DNA technology, which has been revolutionizing criminal investigation since its introduction in the 1980s, becomes more accessible and affordable for the general public. Companies begin offering consumer DNA testing services, allowing people to submit a sample and learn about their ancestry, their genetic heritage, and potentially connect with unknown relatives. These services build databases of genetic information from millions of people, and they offer tools for comparing DNA profiles to find matches. One of the Albino family members, a daughter who was born after Luis disappeared, decides to take a DNA test out of curiosity. She's interested in learning more about the family's Puerto Rican heritage, about where they came from, about the genetic makeup that makes her who she is. She sends in her sample and waits for the results. A few weeks later, she receives an email notification that her results are ready. She logs into the website and begins exploring the information. The ancestry breakdown is interesting, showing the mix of European, African, and indigenous American DNA that's typical of Puerto Rican heritage. But what really catches her attention is the section on DNA matches. The testing company has identified other people in their database who share segments of DNA with her, indicating varying degrees of family relationship. There are the expected matches, cousins she knows about, distant relatives she's heard of but never met. But there's one match that doesn't make sense. The website identifies this person as a very close match, likely a first cousin or possibly even closer. But she doesn't recognize the name. The profile picture shows an elderly man, probably in his 70s, with dark hair gone gray, deep-set eyes, and a kind smile. Who is this person? She clicks through to send him a message on the platform. Hello, the website shows that we're closely related, but I don't recognize your name. Do you know how we might be connected? I'm part of the Albino family from Oakland, California, originally from Puerto Rico. I'd love to learn more about our family connection. She sends the message and goes about her day, not expecting much to come of it. These DNA matches can be confusing, and sometimes the relationships aren't as close as the algorithms suggest. But a few days later, she receives a response, and what she reads makes her blood run cold. The man writes back, I was told my name is, and he gives a name that isn't Luis Albino. But I was born in Puerto Rico, and I've always felt like there was something about my childhood that didn't add up. I was raised on the East Coast by parents who told me they adopted me when I was very young. I don't have any memories of my life before about age 7 or 8. Your message is the first time anyone has ever contacted me claiming to be family. Can you tell me more about your family? The daughter sits at her computer, her hands shaking. She reads the message again, trying to process what she's seeing. A man, roughly the right age, who was adopted as a young child, who has no early memories, who was told he was from Puerto Rico. Could it be? She immediately calls her mother and her remaining siblings. She reads them the message. There's a long silence on the line. Then, one by one, they begin to piece it together. The age is right. The background story makes sense. And the DNA match is too close to be a coincidence. They need to find out more. Over the next several weeks, the family exchanges messages with this man. He shares what little he knows about his early childhood. He was raised by a couple on the East Coast, he says, people who told him they adopted him legally, though he's never seen the paperwork. They told him he was born in Puerto Rico but came to the mainland as a very young child. He had a normal childhood, as far as he can remember, though there are gaps in his memory, especially from the earliest years. He grew up, went to school, got married, had children of his own. He's lived a full life, though he's always wondered about his origins, about where he really came from. The family asks if he'd be willing to share photographs from throughout his life. He agrees and sends several images. There are pictures from his childhood, his teenage years, his adult life. The family pores over these images, looking for any resemblance to the little boy who disappeared from that Oakland park so many decades ago. It's hard to say. 70 years have passed. People change so much from childhood to old age. But there's something about the eyes, about the shape of the face. Antonia, now in her 90s and in poor health, is shown the photographs. She stares at them for a long time, tears streaming down her face. I think it's him, she whispers. I think it's my Luis. But thinking isn't the same as knowing. The family needs proof, definitive proof that this man is really Luis Albino. They reach out to the Oakland Police Department and explain the situation. The department assigns a detective to review the case. The detective is skeptical at first. After all, this case is more than 70 years old, and there have been false leads before. But when he sees the DNA evidence, when he sees how close the match is, he agrees that it warrants further investigation. The detective contacts the man, who will continue to call by the name he's known by for most of his life, though his true identity is about to be revealed. The man agrees to cooperate fully with the investigation. He's as eager for answers as the Albino family is. The detective requests a fresh DNA sample to confirm the match and to compare against any DNA evidence that might exist from the original case. This presents a challenge because, of course, in 1951, DNA technology didn't exist. There's no biological sample from Luis Albino on file. However, the detective is able to obtain DNA samples from Antonia and from Roger, Luis's older brother who was at the park the day he disappeared. These samples are compared to the DNA from the man on the East Coast. The results come back, and they're conclusive. The genetic markers match. This man is not just related to the Albino family. He is Antonia's son. He is Roger's brother. He is Luis Albino. The confirmation sends shockwaves through the family and through the Oakland Police Department. A child who disappeared in 1951 has been found alive in the 21st century. It's almost unheard of. The detective begins the process of piecing together what happened, how a 6-year-old boy vanished from an Oakland park and ended up being raised under a different name on the other side of the country. Luis, when told that he is indeed the missing child from Oakland, is stunned. His entire understanding of his identity, of his origins, of who he is, has been turned upside down. The people he thought were his adoptive parents have both passed away, so he can't ask them directly what happened. But he begins to search through old family documents, looking for clues. He finds paperwork that supposedly documents his adoption, but the details are vague. There's no mention of birth parents, no official court records, nothing that would typically accompany a legitimate adoption. The more he digs, the more it becomes clear that his adoption was likely not legal at all. He was taken, abducted from that park in Oakland, and somehow ended up with a couple who raised him as their own son. Whether they knew he was stolen or whether they were told some story about him being an orphan or a child whose parents couldn't care for him, that's unclear. But the fact remains that Luis Albino was taken from his family and given a new identity. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. The detective works with authorities on the East Coast to investigate the couple who raised Luis. Records show that they lived in the area where Luis grew up, that they had no biological children of their own, and that a young boy suddenly appeared in their household around 1951 or 1952. Neighbors from that era, those few who are still alive and have clear memories, recall the couple bringing home a young child. Some remember being told it was an adoption. Others remember thinking it was strange that the boy seemed to appear out of nowhere, with no pregnancy, no prior mention of adoption proceedings. But in that era, people minded their own business. If a couple said they'd adopted a child, you didn't question it too closely. The detective uncovers some disturbing information. The couple who raised Luis had been investigated at one point for possible involvement in illegal adoptions, though no charges were ever filed. In the 1940s and 50s, there was a black market for babies and young children. Unscrupulous individuals would steal children or convince desperate mothers to give up their babies, then sell these children to couples who wanted to be parents but couldn't through legitimate channels. It was a dark, ugly business, and it ruined countless lives. Was Luis a victim of this black market? The evidence suggests he might have been. The detective theorizes that Luis was abducted from the park by someone, possibly a woman working alone or a couple working together, who saw an opportunity. A small boy, momentarily unsupervised, in a neighborhood where there were immigrant families whose English wasn't perfect, who might not be taken as seriously by authorities. Luis was taken, possibly driven across the country immediately, and delivered to the couple who would raise him. By the time the Oakland police were searching for him, he was already hundreds of miles away, in a different state, with people calling him by a different name. Luis himself struggles to reconcile his two identities. For more than 70 years, he's been one person, living one life. Now he's being told he's someone else entirely, that his first 6 years of life were stolen from him, that he has a biological family he never knew existed. The psychological impact is enormous. He experiences a range of emotions: shock, anger, grief for the childhood that was taken from him, confusion about who he really is. At the same time, he feels compassion for the parents who raised him. They're both gone now, but they were the only parents he knew. They fed him, clothed him, sent him to school, taught him right from wrong. Can he hate them for what they did, when they're also the people who made him who he is? The Albino family is overjoyed to have found Luis, but they too are grappling with complicated emotions. Antonia, in particular, is overwhelmed. She's an elderly woman now, not in good health, and she's been told that the son she lost 73 years ago is alive. She wants desperately to meet him, to see him in person, to hold him and tell him that she never stopped loving him, never stopped looking for him. Arrangements are made for Luis to travel to California to meet his biological family. The reunion is planned carefully, with support from therapists and social workers who specialize in trauma and reunification. The day of the reunion is emotionally charged beyond description. Luis arrives in Oakland, the city of his birth, a place he has no memory of. He's met at the airport by several family members, his siblings, his nieces and nephews, a whole extended family he didn't know he had. There are tears, embraces, and an overwhelming sense of the surreal. How do you reconnect with people you're related to by blood but have never known? How do you bridge a gap of 73 years? But the most important reunion is yet to come. Luis is taken to Antonia's home, where she waits for him. She's confined to a wheelchair now, her body frail with age, but her mind is sharp, and her heart is full of hope and fear and desperate love. When Luis walks into the room and sees Antonia for the first time, there's a moment of stillness. Mother and son, separated for more than 7 decades, are finally in the same room. Antonia looks at him, really looks at him, searching his face for the little boy she lost. And somehow, impossibly, she sees him there. In the set of his eyes, in the curve of his smile, in some indefinable quality that only a mother would recognize, she sees her Luis. Luis approaches slowly, carefully, not wanting to overwhelm her. He kneels down beside her wheelchair, and Antonia reaches out with trembling hands to touch his face. "Mijo," she whispers, a Spanish term of endearment. "My son." They embrace, and both are crying, decades of grief and longing and loss pouring out in that moment. Roger, Luis's older brother, is also there. Roger is now in his 80s, an old man himself, but the guilt and pain of that day at the park have never left him. When he sees Luis, the brother he lost, the brother he's blamed himself for losing for 73 years, he breaks down completely. "I'm sorry," he says, over and over. "I'm so sorry. I should have been watching you. I should have kept you safe." Luis, who understands now what happened, who knows that a 6-year-old boy disappearing wasn't the fault of his 10-year-old brother, embraces Roger and tells him it wasn't his fault. "None of this was your fault," Luis says. "We were just kids." Roger sobs in his brother's arms, and in that embrace, there's a kind of healing, a release of guilt that's been carried for far too long. Over the following days and weeks, Luis spends time with his biological family, learning about the people he came from, the culture he was taken from, the life he might have lived. He hears stories about his childhood, those 6 years before he disappeared, though he has no memory of any of it. His family shows him photographs, tells him about the neighborhood where they lived, the park where he was taken. They explain how hard they searched for him, how they never gave up hope, how his disappearance shaped all of their lives. Luis, in turn, shares his own story, the life he lived, the person he became. It's strange and painful and beautiful all at once, this piecing together of two separate lives that should have been one. The media gets hold of the story, and it becomes international news. A child abducted in 1951, found alive 73 years later through DNA technology. It's a story of hope, of the power of never giving up, of how modern science can solve even the coldest of cold cases. News outlets from around the world cover the reunion, and the images of Luis embracing his elderly mother and his brother are broadcast everywhere. The story resonates with people because it touches on our deepest fears, the fear of losing a child, and our deepest hopes, the hope that what's lost can somehow be found. But as the initial euphoria of the reunion fades, difficult questions remain. What happens to the people who took Luis? The couple who raised him are both deceased, so they can't be held accountable. Were there others involved in his abduction and illegal adoption? The investigation continues, but after so many decades, most of the people who might have had information are gone. The trail is cold in a different way now, not because Luis himself can't be found, but because the truth of exactly what happened that February day in 1951 may never be fully known. Did someone specifically target Luis, or was he a victim of opportunity? Was his abduction part of a larger black market adoption ring, or an isolated incident? The detective assigned to the case does his best to find answers, but there are limits to what can be uncovered after 73 years. For Luis, the process of integrating his two identities is ongoing. He is Luis Albino, the child who was taken from Oakland, and he is also the person he's been for more than 70 years, with a different name and a different life. Both are true. Both are part of who he is. He works with therapists to process the trauma of discovering that his entire childhood was based on a lie, that he was stolen from a family who loved him and never stopped searching for him. At the same time, he has to reconcile the fact that he loved the people who raised him, even if they obtained him through terrible means. It's a complex psychological burden, one that would be difficult for anyone to carry. Antonia, for her part, is simply grateful to have her son back before she dies. She knows that time is short, that her health is failing, but she's been given a gift that few parents of missing children ever receive. She's been given the chance to see her child again, to know that he's alive, that he's had a good life, that he's okay. In the months following the reunion, Antonia and Luis spend as much time together as possible. He visits her regularly, and they talk for hours. Sometimes they talk about the past, about his early childhood, about what happened. Other times, they simply enjoy being in each other's presence, making up for lost time in whatever small way they can. Sadly, Antonia passes away not long after being reunited with Luis. She dies peacefully, surrounded by her children, including the son she thought she'd lost forever. Her death is a loss for the entire family, but there's a sense of peace in knowing that she died having found Luis, that she didn't have to go to her grave wondering what happened to him. At her funeral, Luis stands with his siblings and speaks about his mother, this woman he barely remembers from his early childhood but who never stopped loving him. He talks about her strength, her perseverance, her refusal to give up hope even when everyone else had. He thanks her for never forgetting him, for keeping his memory alive, for searching for him until the very end. There's not a dry eye in the church. Roger lives for a few more years after Antonia's death, and during that time, he and Luis develop a close relationship. They talk often, making up for the 73 years they lost. Roger tells Luis stories about their childhood, about what their parents were like, about the neighborhood where they grew up. Luis treasures these conversations, these glimpses into a past he has no memory of. When Roger eventually passes away, Luis feels the loss deeply. His older brother, the one who carried the guilt of his disappearance for so many years, the one who never forgave himself, is gone. Luis speaks at Roger's funeral too, and he tells everyone assembled that Roger was a good brother, that what happened at the park was not his fault, that Roger protected him and loved him to the best of his ability. He hopes that wherever Roger is now, he finally knows peace, that he's finally free of the guilt that haunted him for so long. The case of Luis Albino raises important questions about missing children, about abduction, about the black market adoption practices that were more common in the mid-20th century than many people realize. It highlights the importance of never giving up on cold cases, because sometimes, against all odds, there can be resolution. It also demonstrates the incredible power of DNA technology to solve crimes and reunite families, even after multiple generations have passed. The Oakland Police Department updates Luis's case file, changing his status from missing to found. After 73 years, one of their oldest cold cases has been solved. It's a rare and remarkable outcome, and it brings a sense of closure not just to the Albino family, but to the investigators and community members who never forgot about the little boy who vanished from the park. Luis continues to live his life, now with a fuller understanding of who he is and where he came from. He maintains relationships with his siblings and extended family, attending family gatherings and staying connected. He's an elderly man now, and he knows that his time is limited, but he's grateful for the years he's had, both the life he lived not knowing his true identity and the time he's had reconnecting with his roots. He's written a memoir, working with a ghostwriter, to tell his story in full. The book details his abduction, his childhood with his adoptive family, the DNA discovery, and the reunion with his biological family. It's a story of loss and recovery, of identity and belonging, of the enduring power of family bonds. The memoir is published to critical acclaim and becomes a bestseller. People are fascinated by Luis's story, by the idea that you can live most of your life not knowing who you really are, and then have that identity revealed in old age. The book sparks conversations about adoption ethics, about the black market in children that existed in earlier eras, about the importance of properly documenting and regulating adoptions to prevent such tragedies. It also brings attention to the many missing children cases that remain unsolved, the families who are still searching, still hoping, still wondering what happened to their loved ones. Luis uses his platform to advocate for missing children and their families. He speaks at conferences and events, sharing his story and encouraging others never to give up hope. He supports organizations that work to find missing persons and that use DNA technology to identify remains and reunite families. He's become, in his final years, a voice for those who can't speak for themselves, a reminder that every missing person is someone's child, someone's sibling, someone who is loved and missed and deserved to be searched for. The Oakland park where Luis was abducted has changed over the decades. It's been renovated several times, with new playground equipment, new benches, new landscaping. But the bones of it are the same patch of grass where two brothers played tag on a February afternoon in 1951. In honor of Luis's story and as a reminder about child safety, the city installs a small plaque in the park. It doesn't give all the details of what happened, but it notes that this park was the site of a child abduction in 1951, and it serves as a reminder to parents and caregivers to stay vigilant, to watch their children, to never assume that a public place is perfectly safe. The plaque also notes that the case was solved 73 years later through DNA technology, a testament to the fact that families should never give up hope. The story of Luis Albino is extraordinary in its outcome, but it's important to remember that for every case like his, there are hundreds or thousands that don't end in reunion. There are missing children who are never found, families who never get answers, cold cases that remain cold forever. Luis's story is a beacon of hope, but it's also an outlier. Most abducted children aren't found alive decades later. Most families don't get the miracle that the Albino family received. This makes Luis's story all the more precious, all the more worth telling and retelling. It's proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible can happen. As Luis enters the final chapter of his life, he reflects on the strange journey he's been on, the two lives he's lived, the two families he's belonged to. He doesn't regret the life he had, even though it was built on a terrible crime. He loved the people who raised him, he had a good career, he has children and grandchildren who are the light of his life. But he's also grateful to have discovered his roots, to have known his biological mother before she died, to have reconciled with his brother, to have understood where he came from. Both halves of his life are valid, both have shaped who he is. He's a man who was stolen and found, who was lost and recovered, who lived one life in ignorance and another in knowledge. His story is unique, but the themes it touches on are universal: identity, family, belonging, love, loss, and the enduring human capacity for hope. The investigators who worked on Luis's case, particularly the detective who helped facilitate the reunion, describe it as the highlight of their careers. In law enforcement, you see a lot of tragedy, a lot of cases that don't end well, a lot of families who never get closure. To be part of a case that ended in reunion, that brought a family back together after 73 years, that gave an elderly mother the chance to hold her son one more time, it's the kind of outcome that reminds you why you do the job. The detective keeps a photograph on his desk, a picture from the day Luis and Antonia were reunited, mother and son embracing, tears of joy streaming down both their faces. When the job gets hard, when the cases seem hopeless, he looks at that photograph and remembers that sometimes miracles do happen. The DNA testing company that facilitated the match between Luis and his biological family has used his story in their marketing and educational materials. They've highlighted how their technology can do more than just tell you what percentage Irish or Italian you are. It can reunite families, solve crimes, bring closure to decades-old mysteries. The case has prompted thousands of people to submit their own DNA for testing, hoping that they too might find unknown relatives or solve family mysteries. The company has been involved in numerous other reunification cases since Luis's story became public, though few have been as dramatic or spanned as many decades. Law enforcement agencies have also taken note of the case and have begun to more actively use DNA databases to investigate cold cases. The Oakland Police Department and police departments across the country have started uploading DNA profiles from old, unsolved cases to public databases, hoping to find matches that might crack cases that have been cold for years or decades. This approach has led to the resolution of numerous cases, from identifying remains to catching criminals who thought they'd gotten away with their crimes long ago. Luis's case has been a catalyst for this work, a high-profile example of what's possible when you combine old-fashioned detective work with cutting-edge technology. There are ethical considerations, of course, around the use of consumer DNA databases for law enforcement purposes. Privacy advocates have raised concerns about the implications of having our genetic information stored in databases that can be accessed by police. But proponents argue that the benefits, the solved crimes, the reunited families, the identified remains, outweigh the potential privacy concerns. Luis himself has weighed in on this debate, saying that he's grateful the technology existed and that his niece happened to take a DNA test, because without it, he would have died never knowing his true identity, and his family would have died never knowing what happened to him. For him, the privacy concerns pale in comparison to the peace and closure that DNA technology provided. The case has also renewed interest in other decades-old missing children cases from the Oakland area and beyond. Families who've had loved ones missing for years or decades have reached out to the police department, asking if DNA technology might help solve their cases too. Some of these families have submitted their own DNA to databases, hoping for matches. Others have requested that old evidence from their loved ones' cases be retested using modern DNA techniques. Not all of these efforts will be successful. DNA doesn't solve every case, but Luis's story has given these families renewed hope, and hope is a powerful thing. From a historical perspective, Luis's case provides a window into a dark chapter of American history that's often overlooked, the black market in babies and children that flourished in the mid-20th century. Before adoption laws were properly regulated and enforced, before there were rigorous background checks and home studies and legal processes, children could be bought and sold like commodities. Some were stolen outright, like Luis appears to have been. Others were coerced from their birth mothers, who were told they had no choice but to give up their babies. Still others were purchased from unscrupulous doctors or lawyers who arranged illegal adoptions for profit. Thousands of children were affected by these practices, and many grew up never knowing their true origins. Luis's story has prompted researchers and journalists to dig deeper into this history, to uncover the full extent of the black market adoption industry and to tell the stories of those affected by it. There have been documentaries produced, articles written, academic papers published, all exploring this dark period and its lasting impacts. Some adoptees from that era, now elderly themselves, have come forward to share their own stories, their own discoveries about being illegally adopted or having their origins obscured. Luis has become something of a figurehead for this community, a symbol of the resilience of those who had their identities stolen from them. The psychological literature has also taken an interest in Luis's case. Therapists and psychologists who specialize in trauma, identity, and adoption have studied his experience to better understand what it means to discover late in life that your entire identity was built on a lie. How does a person process that information? How do they integrate their past and present selves? What are the long-term psychological impacts of such a discovery? Luis has been generous in sharing his experience with mental health professionals, participating in interviews and case studies, in the hope that his experience can help others who might find themselves in similar situations. While cases like his are rare, they do happen, and the more we understand about the psychological impacts, the better equipped we are to help those affected. Luis has also reconnected with Puerto Rican culture and heritage, something that was largely absent from his life growing up on the East Coast. He's learned Spanish or relearned it, since he apparently spoke it as a very young child before being taken. He's traveled to Puerto Rico to visit the places his family came from, to walk the streets his parents walked, to connect with the land of his birth. These experiences have been deeply meaningful to him, providing a sense of roots and belonging that he didn't have before. He's cooked traditional Puerto Rican dishes with his siblings, learned about the island's history and culture, attended cultural festivals and events. In his 70s and 80s, he's reclaiming a heritage that was stolen from him as a child. His children and grandchildren have also embraced this newfound heritage. They've learned about their Puerto Rican roots, incorporated elements of the culture into their own lives, and built relationships with the extended Albino family. For them, it's been a strange and wonderful expansion of their family tree, the sudden appearance of aunts and uncles and cousins they never knew existed. Luis's grandchildren in particular have been fascinated by his story, by the idea that their grandfather lived most of his life not knowing who he really was. It sparked conversations in their own families about identity, about heritage, about what makes us who we are. The legal aspects of Luis's case have also been examined. While the people who abducted him are deceased and can't be prosecuted, legal scholars have used his case as a teaching tool, discussing the crimes that were committed, the jurisdictional issues involved in an interstate abduction, the statute of limitations on kidnapping, and the legal rights of adoptees to know their true origins. Some states have since passed laws making it easier for adoptees to access their original birth certificates and adoption records, partly in response to cases like Luis's. The consensus is that people have a right to know where they come from, who their biological family is, and the circumstances of their adoption, if any. As Luis's story spread around the world, it inspired similar searches in other countries. There have been cases of missing children found decades later in Europe, in Asia, in South America, often through DNA testing. The technology has become a global tool for solving cold cases and reuniting families. International databases have been established to help cross-border searches, and organizations dedicated to finding missing persons have incorporated DNA testing into their standard protocols. Luis's case is often cited as the gold standard, the example that proves that no case is ever truly hopeless, that families should never stop looking, and that technology can bridge even the widest gulfs of time and distance. Now, as Luis enters the twilight of his life, he's at peace with his story. He's written his memoir, reconnected with his biological family, advocated for missing children, and contributed to a broader understanding of abduction, illegal adoption, and the power of DNA technology. He knows that his time is limited, that he won't live forever, but he's satisfied that he's made the most of the years he had after discovering the truth. He's a grandfather and great-grandfather, a role he cherishes. He's maintained relationships with both sides of his family, the biological relatives he reconnected with and the family of the people who raised him. He doesn't see these as competing loyalties, but rather as different chapters of the same life, all of which have value, all of which have shaped who he is. When asked how he wants to be remembered, Luis says he wants people to know that identity is complex, that who we are is shaped both by our biology and by our experiences, that family isn't just about blood but also about love and care. He wants people to remember that children who are abducted aren't just statistics, they're real people with families who love them, and those families deserve answers. He wants people to know that it's never too late to find the truth, never too late to reunite, never too late to heal. And he wants people to understand that even when terrible things happen, even when children are stolen and identities are erased, the human spirit has an incredible capacity for resilience, for forgiveness, for moving forward. The park in Oakland where Luis was taken has become something of a pilgrimage site for people interested in his story. Visitors come to see the place where it all happened, to read the plaque, to reflect on the randomness of tragedy and the possibility of miracles. The neighborhood has changed dramatically since 1951. The modest homes where immigrant families once lived have been renovated or replaced. The demographics have shifted. But the park remains, a green space in the urban landscape, a place where children still play, where parents still watch carefully, where life continues. And now, it's also a place where one of the most remarkable true stories in the history of missing children cases began and, in a sense, ended. Luis has visited the park several times since discovering the truth about his abduction. Each visit is emotional. He stands there, trying to imagine what happened, trying to access memories that don't exist. He was only 6 years old. His brain hadn't fully formed those long-term memories yet. The park is familiar in photos but foreign in experience. Still, there's something powerful about standing on the ground where his life changed, where one path ended and another began. The story of Luis Albino has been adapted into various media formats. There's been a documentary film that traces his journey from abduction to reunion, featuring interviews with Luis, his family, the detectives who worked on the case, and experts in DNA technology and missing persons investigations. The documentary premiered at film festivals and was later picked up by a streaming service, where it's been viewed by millions of people worldwide. There have also been podcast episodes dedicated to his story, television news specials, and countless articles in print and online media. Each retelling of the story reaches new audiences and inspires new conversations about missing children, about the importance of never giving up, about the incredible potential of genetic science. There's even been talk of a narrative feature film based on Luis's life, though as of now, no such project has been greenlit. If it were to happen, Luis has said he'd want the film to focus not just on the sensational aspects of the story, the abduction and the reunion, but also on the quieter, more intimate moments. A mother who never stopped grieving, a brother who carried guilt for 70 years, a man who lived his whole life as one person only to discover he was someone else entirely. He'd want the film to honor everyone involved, to treat their stories with dignity and respect, to avoid turning tragedy into mere entertainment. Above all, he'd want it to give hope to families who are still searching for their missing loved ones, to show them that miracles can happen. Luis has become friends with other people who've had similar experiences, others who discovered late in life that they were adopted illegally or that their identities were not what they thought. This community, though small, is tight-knit and supportive. They understand each other in ways that outsiders can't. They share the unique experience of having their entire worldview upended by a DNA test or a discovered document or a deathbed confession. They help each other process the complex emotions that come with such revelations, the anger, the grief, the confusion, the strange sense of having lived someone else's life. Luis has been a mentor to some of the younger members of this community, those who've discovered the truth about their origins in their 40s or 50s and are struggling to make sense of it. He tells them that it gets easier with time, that you can honor both your past and your present, that discovering the truth, as painful as it might be, is ultimately better than living a lie. In his final years, Luis has also focused on his faith. He was raised in one religious tradition by his adoptive family, but he's since explored the religious practices of his Puerto Rican heritage as well. He's found comfort and meaning in spirituality, in the idea that there's a purpose to everything, even to terrible events like his abduction. He doesn't claim to fully understand why he was taken, why he lost his family, why he lived most of his life not knowing who he was. But he believes that his story has meaning, that it's helped other people, that it's brought attention to important issues, and that perhaps that's why he was meant to survive, to eventually be found, to tell his story. Whether there's any truth to that belief or whether it's simply a way of making sense of senseless tragedy, it brings him peace, and that's what matters. The remaining members of his biological family, his siblings, and their children and grandchildren, treasure the time they have with Luis. They know that the years are short, that he's an old man now and won't be with them forever. They make the most of every visit, every phone call, every shared meal. They've created new traditions that blend both sides of his life, honoring both the culture he was born into and the life he lived. At family gatherings, there are photos of Luis as a young child with Antonia and Roger, and there are photos of him from his life on the East Coast. Both are displayed proudly, because both are part of who he is. The family doesn't erase or ignore the 70 years he spent away from them. Instead, they incorporate it all, weaving together the disparate threads of Luis's life into a single, coherent narrative. Luis's story has also had an impact on how law enforcement approaches missing children cases. There's been a renewed emphasis on never closing a case, on keeping files active even when leads dry up, on periodically reviewing cold cases with fresh eyes and new technology. The Oakland Police Department has dedicated additional resources to their cold case unit, and they've successfully solved several other old cases using DNA technology and modern investigative techniques. While not all of these cases have had outcomes as positive as Luis's, they've all brought some measure of closure to families who had been waiting years or decades for answers. The department credits Luis's case as the catalyst for this renewed focus, and they've established an award in his name, given annually to investigators who demonstrate exceptional dedication to solving cold cases. There have been academic studies done on the effectiveness of DNA databases in solving cold cases, and Luis's case features prominently in this research. The data shows that cases once thought unsolvable can indeed be cracked with the right tools and enough persistence. The research has influenced policy decisions about funding for cold case investigations, about the maintenance and expansion of DNA databases, and about the training of law enforcement personnel in the use of genetic genealogy techniques. In a very real sense, Luis's story has changed the landscape of criminal investigation and missing persons work. His case is taught in police academies and forensic science programs as an example of how technology and traditional detective work can combine to solve even the most challenging cases. For the scientific community, Luis's case has been a triumph and a proof of concept. The researchers and companies involved in developing consumer DNA testing technology can point to his story as evidence of the real-world impact of their work. Yes, it's interesting to learn what percentage of your DNA comes from various regions of the world, but the technology can also reunite families, solve crimes, and bring closure to decades of uncertainty. This has implications for funding, for research priorities, for how we think about the value and importance of genetic science. Luis's case has helped to mainstream DNA testing, making it more acceptable and more common for ordinary people to submit their genetic information to databases. This, in turn, has made the databases larger and more useful, creating a positive feedback loop that has led to the resolution of countless cases. As we approach the present day, Luis Albino is still alive, though his health is fragile. He's in his late 70s now, and he's lived a life more unusual than most of us could imagine. From his abduction at age 6 to his life on the East Coast to the shocking discovery of his true identity to the reunion with his biological family, his story spans decades and crosses the country. It's a story of loss and recovery, of identity and belonging, of the crimes that humans commit against each other and the love and persistence that can overcome even the greatest tragedies. When interviewers ask him what he's learned from his experience, Luis always says the same thing: family is everything. Whether it's the family you're born into or the family that raises you or the family you create, those connections are what give life meaning. He also says that the truth matters, that living a lie, even an unknowing one, is ultimately hollow, and that discovering the truth, no matter how painful, is a gift. His advice to families of missing children is never to give up. He knows that his case is unusual, that most missing children aren't found alive after 70 years, but he also knows that without his family's persistence, without their willingness to try DNA testing, without their refusal to forget him, he never would have been found. So he tells families to keep searching, keep hoping, keep their loved one's case in the public eye, submit DNA to databases, cooperate with investigators, and above all, never stop believing that answers are possible. And his advice to people who discover late in life that their identity isn't what they thought is to be gentle with themselves, to allow themselves to grieve for the life they didn't have while also appreciating the life they did have, and to know that it's possible to honor both their past and their present. Identity is complex, he says, and there's no one right way to process such a discovery. Looking back over the entire arc of Luis's story, from that February afternoon in 1951 when he disappeared from an Oakland park to the present day, it's impossible not to be struck by the sheer improbability of it all. What are the odds that a child abducted in the mid-20th century would be found alive more than 7 decades later? What are the odds that his niece would happen to take a DNA test? What are the odds that the man who'd been living under a different name would also happen to be in the same DNA database? The chances are infinitesimally small, and yet it happened. This is what makes Luis's story so compelling, so moving, so important. It reminds us that even when the odds are overwhelmingly against us, even when a case seems utterly hopeless, miracles can still happen. It reminds us of the power of love, the strength of family bonds, the importance of never giving up, and the incredible potential of human ingenuity and technology to solve problems that once seemed unsolvable. The case of Luis Albino will be studied, discussed, and referenced for generations to come. It will appear in textbooks on criminal investigation, in courses on genetic science, in discussions about adoption ethics and child welfare. It will be told and retold, each time inspiring new audiences, giving hope to new families, and demonstrating once again that the line between the possible and the impossible is thinner than we think. For Luis himself, the legacy he wants to leave is simple. He wants to be remembered as someone who survived, who persevered, who forgave, and who used his experience to help others. He wants his story to give hope to families who are still searching, to adoptees who are questioning their origins, to anyone who's ever felt lost or displaced or uncertain of who they are. And he wants people to know that it's never too late for the truth to come out, never too late for healing, never too late to come home. As this narrative draws to a close, Luis Albino remains a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of family. His story, spanning from 1951 to the present day, is one of the most remarkable true crime cases in American history. It began with a crime, a 6-year-old boy stolen from a park, and it ended with a miracle, that same boy, now an old man, reunited with the family that never stopped loving him. In between are 73 years of searching, grieving, living, and hoping. It's a story that challenges our understanding of identity, that questions what it means to be a family, that demonstrates the incredible power of modern science, and that proves, once and for all, that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. The sun has set on Luis's extraordinary life journey, but his story will continue to shine as a beacon of hope for all those who search for missing loved ones, for all those who seek the truth about their origins, and for all those who believe that love and persistence can overcome even the greatest obstacles. This is the story of Luis Albino, the boy who was lost and the man who was found. This is a story of darkness and light, of loss and recovery, of 73 years of questions finally answered. And it's a story that reminds us all that miracles do happen, that families can be reunited, and that hope should never be abandoned, no matter how much time has passed. If you've stayed with us through this entire incredible journey, thank you. The story of Luis Albino is one that deserves to be told, remembered, and shared. If this case has moved you, if it's given you hope, or if it's simply shown you the power of never giving up, please hit that like button and subscribe to Cold Case Crime Lab. Share this video with others who might need to hear this story. Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts on this remarkable case. And if you're part of a family still searching for a missing loved one, know that Luis's story proves that it's never too late, that answers can come from the most unexpected places, and that you should never, ever give up hope. Thank you for watching Cold Case Crime Lab. Until next time, keep searching for the truth, keep believing in miracles, and remember that every cold case is someone's tragedy, someone's mystery, and potentially, someone's miracle waiting to happen.